Because the second thing to say, of course, is that a lot depends on the opponent. So sometimes, like a lot of the things that I do, that other people will say, oh, that's folly. It's like, actually, it's not. So if you have good structure, good springy structure, and you just hit in, like, just make contact with the opponent and they're off balance, it's so easy just to ping them back. Balance is so difficult. This is just something that we don't understand because, for everyone who can walk, we've mastered balance. Think about how difficult it was to ride a bike. And then when you can ride a bike, it's so easy, but when you can't, it's so hard. Balance is incredibly difficult, and human beings are balanced on two legs, and that is incredibly precarious. We just don't understand this. The slightest thing can knock you off balance. It's just that normally doesn't happen in daily life. If it does, it's usually an accident. But if someone's like hitting you, force is coming in at you, then you get pinged so easily. Like there's one that I've shown before where I'm pushing against a tree branch or something like that. So it's only my own energy, but it just pings back into me. And it's got to be less than my own energy, which is not a great deal of energy anyway, because I'm just kind of practicing a gentle movement, and it just pings back from the tree branch, and it just pings back right down and takes me right off my route. So it takes almost nothing to unbalance someone. So if your structure is good and you just hit in and you ping them, then they'll go flying back. And I've got plenty of examples of me doing that when I'm sparring. So that means we can't ignore this other dimension of the dialectic of Yiquan, the fight training aspect. How do you get into that position? How do you, what we used to call bridging, how do you close that gap, get your hands on someone, and then how do you time that correctly so that you can transmit force? And then that starts to feed into all the ideas around setting postures, structural articulation, use of correct context. So that's another thing that we need to take a really close look at. I was thinking of a good example the other day because I want to look at lots of stuff around push hands. So if you are, your hands are on someone and you want to move their arms, they're in a diametrically opposite position to you. You can go this way or you can go this way. If you go this way, it's easier to hit him with your hand. If you go this way, it's easier to hit him with that hand. So there's all these other kinds of dimensions around how we use pushing. And of course, push hands itself, so guiding force, where we're moving people around, also could be considered a push. And then there's also what we might call checking. So this is something I do all the time. You can see me doing it in sparring. It's part of the social construction of violence that, you ever see someone do bag work, right? And they just do really like vanilla bag work, like they're just doing some punches and combinations. And the difference between, this is how I got banned, initially banned at the gym for the normal gym, for using a bag, because like I'm hitting the bag and then I'm shoulder barging it and, up close and personal and roughing it about and pulling and pushing. So thinking about fight training much more practically like that, the rough and tumble of practical fight training, that's not something you really get from an overemphasis on push hands. But what you do get from push hands is the timing and the ability to make these things work in practice. And one of these things is like checking, which you can also do in push hands, by the way, checking the opponent. So simply put, just pushing on their structure to disrupt their movement. Just they think they're moving forward and you push them at a certain point and it just either pushes them off balance or just stops them in their tracks. And the best way to do this, the way that I always do it, it's so trained into me now, is if you see any part of their back, to push on that. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said, if something is falling, give it a push. Well, it might not be falling, but as soon as you see the back, then you know they're vulnerable, because usually if you can see the back, then you can push them along their weak axis. So if you think like front leg, back leg, if you push back onto the back leg, that's the strongest axis. But if you push sideways, that's the weakest axis. So usually if you can see a shoulder or part of the back, that's their weakest axis. So you can either check them or you can guide them round, which is again something that I do all the time. And that's just like a different way of thinking, like instead of doing kind of vanilla sort of sparring or boxing, being much more rough and tumble about it, And if you want to be much more aggressive about it, instead of just checking, you can push. And that, it's amazing how many times that can just make someone's punch just go miles off course. You know, just check the shoulder, punch the arm, punch the guard, check the guard. Just you know, it's not the sort of thing you can do consciously. And I always say, like, if you look at all that guard breaking stuff that I do when I'm sparring, even I'm like, you know, how do you do that? I mean, I know I've drilled it and practiced it, but like, I never feel like just sat here, I don't feel like I have some knowledge of how I do that. I can't feel like it's just something that happens. It's drilled in, it's trained, and it's like something else does actually just take over and just does it. So you can't always consciously do it. The exceptions are when someone's got a really bad habit. So, you know, you've got people who always do like 1, 2 fake punches and then a jab. People have habits like that, so that you can time it. Because I love the, you know, grab the jab with both hands and pull. So if people have got a habit like that, you can time it. But usually it's not something you can consciously think about. So you've just got to drill it, train it. And if you drill it, it will happen in reality. It's just that most people aren't doing the right kinds of drills. They're just doing push hands and standing and thinking that it will happen through that, and it won't. So there's all these different kinds of ways of using pushes and these different dimensions of pushes that come into each one that we want to use in different ways. And I suppose we have to address something else, which is the theory of some of the people who are promoting each one is so misleading that all of this stuff it can't ever be lost, because for one thing, there's lots of other people who know it. But for two, it's natural, it's embedded within the structure of physical movement itself. But it's the theory, the nonsense theory that takes people off course. So when you ask some Yiquan people about, well, why do you do pushing? And they'll say, well, when you're in a fight, you could push someone down the stairs. And I think, well, that just tells me straight away that it tells me where they're at. This is where it has to bring in the science, right? This is about a scientific understanding of fight training up to a point, because there's a point where fight training is about craft, not science. But up to a certain point, and it's a bigger conceptual point that you've got to try and get your mind around, that it's not like Jeet Kune Do. It's not like thinking about fight, self-defense scenarios as such and thinking what kind of technique would be effective. It's not about techniques. Techniques are secondary. It's about core physical movement principles and how you apply them. Pushing someone down the stairs is a technique. It's not a core movement principle. So that should tell you that that's not what it's about in each one. It's not about pushing someone into someone else. It's not about a technique. But secondly, when would you ever push someone down the stairs? Like, it's the most, like, if you do that, you're probably going to kill someone, right? So it's the most extreme example. It's like you're in a life or death situation, you have no choice, or you do something incredibly stupid, but either way you end up in front of a judge and you've got to explain why you took this unbelievably extreme measure. So when they're asked to explain, well, why is there all this pushing in each one? The best that they can come up with is this most extreme case scenario of executing someone, or this other one of like pushing someone into someone else. And you know, most of these people have never had a fight in their life, either in sport or in real life, and they've no idea what really happens or how you feel in those kinds of both of those situations. But I can tell you, I've actually done this in real life, pushed someone into someone else, and it didn't do nothing. They just disentangled themselves and still give me a leather, and so it just didn't make any difference. You know, yeah, maybe I could have been lucky and one could have headbutted the other and knocked him out, but it's such a rare and unusual scenario. Let's just say pushing someone down the stairs. How many times in your lifetime are you going to need to push someone down the stairs? 0 for the vast majority of the human race. So why would you spend hours doing standing and Yiquan training? Would you even need to anyway, just to push someone down the stairs? Anyone could do that. A child could do that. So it obviously doesn't make any kind of sense. And this is what we call glass theory, that it has no relationship to the reality of either Yiquan or the context of actual real violence. It's glass theory because it breaks the moment it meets any impact, it just shatters. And this is what would happen to all of these people. We were talking about all this kind of nonsense theory around each one. The moment they're faced with, even if someone just turned up to challenge them, they would absolutely, like, they've no idea, that feeling of your blood pressure just completely drops and everything in your mind is saying, run away, you don't want to be there. That's why you've got to do loads of sparring and fight training. That's the only thing that builds up the experience and the confidence, so that it's like second nature. So like having a fight is like nothing. Still doesn't completely take away that because it's a different context, but these people would collapse immediately if they had to actually engage in any kind of real violence. And most of them have just gotten away with it for so long that they've now become quite elderly, in their 50s. And now they can say, oh, I'm too old for all that. It's like, they've gotten away with it. They've gotten away with it. They've bought meaningless certificates. They've peddled this nonsense for literally decades. They've insulted and abused so many people. I mean, they're all the same. I think Yao's Yiquan is the worst. So-called Yao's Yiquan. I don't buy into any of that different kind of Yiquans. Some of the stuff coming out from China. Anyone who was paying attention like 15 years ago understood that this was the direction that was going in some of this woo stuff that started coming out now, even from them. I mean, they never really did very good demonstrations anyway, like, I don't know why. They got all the people there, they got all the resources. My coach told me that, Yao Chengguang was sparring with like members of China's pro Sandar team. Where's all that footage? Why is it only just push hands? Anyway, some of the stuff that's coming out is so embarrassing. People hopping about and getting in bed with all this kind of woo tai chi, not woo, but woo tai chi chuan, charlatanry. It's just unbelievable. I've forgotten what I was talking about. So the reason that we want pushing isn't so that we can push someone down the stairs and murder them. And that's always linked into this, like, oh yeah, well, there's these fights, these gangsters were out, fighting these gangsters in the 1940s. Like, we've got people who are still living off that, like something that didn't even happen, and it happened decades before they were even born. And they're living off that just like they leech off the reputation of other men in China. They're despicable, all of them. Anyway, you wouldn't need to do that. You wouldn't need to do all that Yiquan training just to be able to do that. So it's obviously not about that. And if you actually read what Wang Shenjai wrote, this is the astonishing thing that's gone wrong here, is that people don't actually know what Wang Shenjai wrote, even though you can just go and get really good translations. Oh well. Of course, the AI translation is not always perfect, but you can understand what Wang Shenjai was actually talking about when he's explaining these kind of key ideas around why we need these kind of skills. It's nothing to do with pushing people into someone else. It's to do with disrupting the opponent's structure. You put your hands on them, you momentarily disrupt their structure. This is the terminology we use. You infect their structure with your unbalancedness, so your single-weightedness. This is why single-weightedness and double-weightedness are so significantly important. Your single-weightedness is a form of unbalance. It's an unbalanced posture, and you infect the opponent's structure with your unbalance. And it's a battle between who can control that unbalance best, because it's always unbalanced. Single-weighted posture is always unbalanced. Yeah, so this is like core theory that you've got to get your mind around. This is why they say, like, the health posture is feet flat and the combat posture is 1 foot forward, because the combat posture is single weighted, and it can be a stronger or a weaker posture depending on which way you're pushed, but single weighted is always unbalanced. It's always the weight's more on one leg than the other. Yeah? So if you release force, in a single weighted posture, you're actually quite unbalanced, and it takes a lot of skill development to be able to control that. Hit dead stop at the lock point, transmit the force, set the posture. It takes a massive amount of skill to be able to do that. So you're controlling unbalance. And what you want to do at the point where you transmit that force into your opponent, you're transmitting that force to them. So you're trying to infect their posture with your unbalance. And if you can get that right, if you can hit them in the right moment, just momentarily, like if you just, we won't say let's say a push, right? If you can push someone, and then as they fall backwards, they're not braced. So this is the key concepts that you've got to get your mind around. We want to break the opponent's bracing. So you push them, and in a split second, if they're not trained, they don't brace, like they just kind of fall back and the head starts flying back. If you can hit that in the moment when they're not braced, you get the force magnifying effect, and you can just spark them out, generally speaking. This is why, for example, you go to the dentist and you brace up, your body knows, right? So your body's got this instinct to brace. I do it even in the hairdressers, kind of brace up like that. I'm really tense, someone's really near me. I hate this where they spin the scissors around the finger and all that. I never go back if they do that. But I brace up because the body does that naturally. And some people are trained to do that. So when you push them, they'll brace up, and it makes it a lot harder. So it's not going to work against everyone. You push them, and then when they're not braced, you hit them. But also, if you push them, you've got to hit them before they can brace again. So in many cases, that's going to be too late. By the time you've pushed them, they're too far away, you miss your chance. So that's where you've got to train hit and flow. So you hit up to the hit and stop point, and then you flow straight into the next posture. There's no pullback, it's hit and then straight in again. Same with, if you're doing another kind of posture like in push hands, move the hands. You need to be able to hit the lock point there. At that point, you've disrupted their structure, you've infected it with your imbalance. That lasts for a split second. In that split second, you've got to hit them. And that's why we need to be able to go to a lock point and then immediately change direction and hit them back. And that's also why we need to understand the contexts that we're using. So are we using open or closed primarily? Are we going to go, if we're going to move their hands like this, I need to be able to hit them. If I want to hit them with my lead hand, I need to hit them in that split second when they're unbalanced. This is the secret of each one. And if you don't believe me, go and read Wang's Drive, because it explains this in detail. So you move them, the dog licks your hand, then in that split second you've got to hit the lock point. This is why we need structural movements. All of this is based around why we're practicing Zhanzhuang in the first place, to develop this structural movement skill. We hit the lock point, and then in that split second we need to be able to change and release force back in the opposite direction while they're not braced. And that creates the force magnification effects. And that's the thing in the past that people thought was like some kind of magic power. That's the thing that people like Adam Misner are faking now. Obviously, they can't do it. They can't do it obviously they can't do it. So if we go the other way, so if we go this way with it, 1, 2, we can hit back this way. If we go this way with it, legs in the same position, then we've got to think like, well, what's the easiest way for me to hit them to make up that split second? And in some cases you can't. Like the way that you've used the context means that some postures are too far away for you to hit them in that split second, and other postures, it's not necessarily wrong to hit them, but if you want to get that force magnification effect where they're not braced. So